thank you so much, Brittany, to Kirsten and the entire YWCA family and everyone who's attended. I am Kristie Puckett-Williams. I am the statewide Campaign for Smart Justice Manager. I got a little promotion since I said Brittany, my bio last. So I manage the entire state of North Carolina for the ACLU as far as our campaign for smart justice is concerned. And the campaign for smart justice, I'll go through in just a minute what that is, but I just want to tell you all, thank you so much for spending what I know is probably a long day for some of you on Zoom like it is for me, and I really appreciate it. We will have time for questions at the end. You can put questions into the chat box and I will try to keep up with that. But I do have several slides and I want you to have a really, excuse me, good foundational understanding of why we court watch, how court watching is useful, and so that you can begin to think about ways that you could begin to engage with the court system when and if we go back to being in spaces with one another again. So I will go start sharing my screen so that we can kind of go through. I don't know if everyone is familiar with the ACLU, but the ACLU is a national nonprofit organization that has focused on civil liberties and civil rights for the last 100 years. And a few years ago, they knew that they needed to shift from just legislating and litigating for our communities, on behalf of our communities, and then they needed to work deeply within the community in order to see the change that they would like to see. And so the Campaign for Smart Justice, which I manage, is an unprecedented multi-year effort to decarcerate, to reduce the prison population by half, and to combat and challenge the racial disparities that we know exist within the system. And so COVID has really highlighted not just the disparities that exist within systems, not just the prison industrial complex, but the healthcare industrial complex, the nonprofit industrial complex. All of the industrial complexes are grappling with racial disparities, but it is most keenly felt in the criminal legal system. And we know that, especially in the midst of a pandemic and a public health crisis, that our duty is to reduce the US jail and prison population significantly if we are to if people are to have a chance to survive this pandemic. So the resource that I used, excuse me, to develop this particular training was provided by the Community Justice Exchange, and we would not be able to capture and place a container and a framework for all of the work that we do if it were not for this organization. We knew what we were doing, but they provided the language and the framework and the guidance for which we do this work. And so we always have to shout out the Community Justice Exchange. So I'm gonna jump right into it, y'all. What is court watching? Literally, since the beginning of time, people have gone to court and watched what has happened. We have seen that from Matlock to Perry Mason type shows where people have gone to bear witness or to support their neighbors, their friends who have either been victimized or accused of a crime. And so in the 70s, more formal monitoring programs began to pop up across the country. And they focused on various issues: the treatment of undocumented people in immigration hearings, the rights of survivors in domestic violence cases, the efficiency of court processes and the conditions of court buildings, the protections for children in family court and custody cases. Those were some of the things that those early court watching programs focused on. So in the most recent decade, you know, our conversation about crime has shifted. We went from being the Clinton era of being tough on crime and creating some of the mass incarceration that we see today to talks of ending mass incarceration. And so advocates and activists have started court watching as one way to hold their local criminal legal system or immigration system accountable to community demands, right? And so I just want to reiterate that this is just one way, one tactic that we use to disrupt and to agitate an inequitable, racist, and unjust system. So what are the goals of court watching? So again, for decades, decades, people have used court watching, and a lot of those goals are the same goals that we have today. We want to ensure a more transparent criminal legal system. We want to know what our judges and prosecutors are doing, because in North Carolina, judges and prosecutors are elected officials. And so this is literally our way to create a report card about a judge or a prosecutor. What do they say on the campaign trail, and how does that translate into their courtroom? And so that's very, very important. People use it to gather information for a campaign, whether it's an issue or advocacy campaign, or if it's another judge sending other people in another judge's courtroom to help inform their campaign. People use court watching, again, for a variety of reasons. There is a program called Participatory Defense out of California that provides individual case support that is of the community for the community as a way to disrupt the criminal legal system. We also use it as a way to increase civic engagement and to guarantee that policies that we have fought for, that we have advocated for, or that have been legislated are implemented and implemented in a timely fashion. So again, why do we court watch? We do that because we know, number one, that the work that we do has to be intentional and thorough so that we can achieve the goals. But we court watch so that we can see, number one, just like, what's the problem? What is going on with courts? And the good way to figure out what's happening inside of a courthouse is to sit inside of a courtroom. And so we can look at things like, who are the targets? Who are the allies? Who are the opponents? Who are the constituents? And so when you look at those things, you're like, oh, that sounds like a campaign. Well, you're going to use this information, hopefully, to inform how you engage in other civic activities, whether it's to continue to court watch, whether it's to get out the vote, whether it's to inform people about the people who are on their ballot. Lots of people do not vote the down ticket in an informed way. And that's because at the bottom of that ticket are people who interact in the court system every single day. And we oftentimes don't have any information about how they perform their job duties. And a good way is to look at what's happening inside of the courtroom. And so we use court watching as a tactic. Is court watching an effective tactic to influence your target to produce the desired change? So there were people who believed that the way that bail was being administered in North Carolina was not in line with what the state statute said. And that was basically true. And there were people who created campaigns to end cash bail. There were organizations who worked to end cash bail. And they used court watching as a way to demonstrate that the judges aren't doing what the law states. Like, the prosecutors aren't doing what the law states. The magistrates aren't doing what the law states. They never would have been able to do that if they weren't out looking and seeing what's happening. So we're going to go through several models tonight. This list is not exhaustive by any means, and none of the models are mutually exclusive. Many court watching programs combine several elements from different models to use their court watching. This section on models can be a starting point for you to think through what type of program would be the best fit for your particular context. And when we say campaign strategy, but what do you think works best in your community? What would you like to see happen? So in the exploratory model, people go to court, they gather the initial information about the system, whether it's the criminal legal system, the civil legal system, or the immigration system, to understand the way it operates in order to plan future actions or if they want to conduct additional research. And people do this because they want to outline, like I described a minute ago, the practices and priorities. By outlining those things, it provides them the information and context to form basis of future work, such as, do the judges need to be trained? Do prosecutors need to be trained in this particular area? Or is there a research project focused on an aspect of the system? Or is there going to be a targeted advocacy campaign? An example of this, what happened in New York, law students were working with the Vera Institute of Justice, and they went to court to observe arraignments in New York City to gather data on the forms of bail that judges were likely to set. And they found that the judges relied heavily on cash bail and insurance company bonds. So Vera used these observations to create a training program for public defenders on how to request alternative forms of bail, and for judges on why they should set alternative forms of bail beyond cash and the insurance bonds. These observations helped inform further research on the results of specific cases where alternative forms of bond were set. So simply by court watching, they were able to observe what the problem was and use that knowledge to formulate what the solution to that issue was in that system. There's the civic engagement model, where court watching increases your understanding of, exposure to, or engagement with the criminal, legal, and immigration system. The focus is on the experience of the court watcher and their personal and political development as it relates to larger questions around democratic participation in the legal system. So in this model, the court watching program is viewed as a direct mode of political education, civic engagement, and a means to building people power. And we do that because we want to expose members of the community to the daily injustices of courtrooms. And when people are exposed to the daily injustices that are just embedded in the processes of a courtroom, it can be very radicalizing. It can motivate people to vote, organize, take action, and engage in disrupting and agitating the system in ways that they hadn't thought of doing before. So in New York City, there is a program called Court Watch NYC, and it focuses strictly on the prosecutorial transparency and accountability. And it builds power organizing internally amongst the court watchers. The people who attend are new to organizing around criminal justice reform, and court watching provides like an on-ramp to engaging more deeply within movement work. They attend monthly trainings that involve political and legal education, as well as information about other opportunities beyond court watching. They also attend monthly debriefs to share what they observed and experienced, and to discuss demands they want to make of their district attorneys in the court system. They also meet to organize accountability actions and events and mobilize for lobby days, rallies, and other advocacy opportunities. And so our third model is the individual support model. I really like this model. It's probably one of my favorites. And there's a program out of Durham. Well, it's out of California that I explained to you earlier called Participatory Defense, but there is a chapter in Durham that does amazing, amazing work on the individual support type of court watching. Court watching can influence the outcome of a specific person's court case. In this model, the family, the friends, the neighbors, and the supporters of an accused person attend each of their court dates, showing the judge, the prosecutors, and juries that the accused has community ties and support. Because the impact will vary depending on individuals' case circumstances and context, we only ask that individual court support should be done with consent of the person facing trial and in consultation with their lawyer. And there's very specific reasons why you should always consult their attorney about any courtroom support or individual support that you would want to do. So we do this because community support, whether it's through one-off pack the court days, which is what we've done in Durham. So I can break that down. Basically what happens is there's a group of people in Durham who go to court all the time, and they can see when a person has been locked up or continue to be locked up because they don't have support in the courtroom. And so they'll put a call out for community support to pack the courtroom on behalf of this person. And as a result of that, they've been able to persuade judges just by an entire 3 rows of people standing up saying that they're here for this person, for the judge to reconsider monetary conditions of release for someone to be released, to unsecured or non-financial reasons for them to be released. So again, depending on the specific case and circumstances, the court may resist the presence of supporters in ways that could detrimentally impact the case. And so for these reasons, deciding whether or not to have community court support should be led by the accused person, but also should be informed by their attorney as well. So again, Silicon Valley Debug is the name of the organization that created Participatory Defense. It's a community organizing group in California that developed the practice, and it conducts a range of court watching, including court monitoring and the individual case support. I know that the Durham chapter has saved 750 years of sentences, of time off of people's sentences. 750 years has been saved because of the individual court support. And they last year alone were able to convince judges to unsecure up to $2 million in bonds that poor people and their families would have had to pay. But because of the support of the volunteers in this organization, they were able to disrupt that the wealth-based system that has been created here in North Carolina, where poor people are held in jails simply because they're too poor to purchase their freedom from the government. So there's also the accountability campaign model. This is also one of my favorite ones because it ensures that the system and individual actors within it are accountable for implementation of any recent reform. So like I said earlier, if there's laws passed, if a judge writes an order, if a prosecutor has changed their policies, making sure that those things are being implemented. We use court watching to track the specifics of new reform and actually seeing what it looks like in practice. The end product, whether it is a report or media piece or community forum, can be presented to the public and has clear targets. And we do this because policy changes on paper oftentimes do not anticipate the effect on practices in the courtroom. So without monitoring and community accountability, the court system lacks incentive for enacting decarceral changes, things that cause the system to let more people out. So an example of this is the ACLU of North Carolina. So people who were trained by myself and through the YWCA last year and through the Unitarian Universalist Church of Charlotte, they were trained to watch the new bail policy that came out last March. They began watching daily in bail hearings. We have over 75 trained volunteers who began to court watch last year, and they were monitoring the new bail policy that was implemented to see, is what was happening on paper, is what the judges ordered on paper, was that actually happening in the courtroom? And so we have been working on a report, but due to COVID, the report is on hold, but we look forward to getting back to that, producing that report in the future. So in the advocacy campaign model, court watching collects data and stories to support an advocacy campaign. Observations are focused on a particular issue as part of a broader campaign to demand change. And we do this so that we can write a report about the particular injustice so that it can provide the basis for launching or advancing a campaign that's already happened. So an example is in Arkansas, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law wrote a report, and basically this is what they found. So in Arkansas, thousands of people have been jailed, often repeatedly for weeks or even months at a time, simply because they are poor and cannot afford to pay court costs, fines, and fees. So during their investigation, these attorneys interviewed 205 people who were charged and locked up as a result of their inability to pay fines and fees. They also performed court watching in 8 counties. They sent nearly 300 requests pursuant to the Public Records Act of Arkansas, and they interviewed judges, government officials, and representatives from multiple Arkansas-based social services organizations. And what they found was many judges proceed directly to the punishments available through the fees and fines collection law without first conducting the ability to pay determination that was mandated by state law and federal law. Thousands have been incarcerated for non-payment of fees and fines without requiring the state to meet its burden under the law, proving that an individual's non-payment is a result of a purposeful refusal to obey a sentence or failure to make good faith efforts to obtain the funds for payment. So basically that's a whole lot of words to say that the judges were not doing what they were supposed to do, and people were being locked up for days and weeks and even months at a time. So now let's just talk about, let's take a big deep breath. I know I went through a whole lot of slides really quickly, but I want us to really think deeply about what days, weeks, or even months at a time being locked up, away from your family, away from your job, away from your children, away from your home, your pets. What does that do to a person? And you are basically locking them up because they're too poor to afford to pay something. Not just because they're poor, and you're also in violation of the law yourself. So these judges are literally locking people up for violating a law, yet they're violating a law and nothing is happening to them. So that is a disparity that is in the system. And without these attorneys going to 8 different counties and sitting in those courtrooms, that may have continued until today. This is a reason that court watching is so important. So our next slide is the system monitor model. That's one of our models. Court watching can establish a general culture of transparency and accountability of public officials and court actors. And this model program is designed to be ongoing, and court observers observe court shifts on a steady schedule. The information collected and shared may focus on any number of rotating issues. They can decide that we're going to focus on bail, charging decisions, how protective orders are issued, or you can just watch any number of court players, such as how is this particular prosecutor acting in a courtroom? What about this judge? How does this judge act? Are the public defenders doing what they should be doing? And we do this because an ongoing monitoring program where players in the courtroom, such as the judges, the clerks, the public defenders, and prosecutors, no community members will be present on a regular basis. And we know that this promotes an open, transparent, participatory, and accountable court process. And I will say that y'all see my shirt. It says "People Not Prisons," and it's blue. If you would like, we usually provide our court watchers with a shirt that is similar. If it's not this color, then it is bright yellow with blue letters that says "People Not Prisons." And it is a sight to see when we enter into a courtroom, all wearing the same shirt, people not prisons, with a notebook in our hands. The judge, all the time, every single time, the judge leans over to the clerk and they want to know who we are and what we're doing if they've never seen us, right? And we had staff come over and ask us, why are you here? What's happening? What are you doing? Right? And it's because they're not used to people. They're used to people, family and friends and neighbors, but they're not used to people watching for the purpose of holding them accountable. So in New Orleans, there's an organization called Court Watch NOLA, and it's a nonprofit that has conducted courtroom observations of the New Orleans Parish criminal court system since 2007. They train volunteers on a regular basis and maintain a consistent presence in the courts. So court watchers are easily identified by their bright yellow lanyards. The data collected is used to publish annual reports about the state of the criminal, magistrate, and municipal courts in New Orleans. So citizens that live in that area that don't have the capacity to court watch themselves still have access to the information about how judges and prosecutors and other court actors are performing in the courtroom. So now you got all your models, you've learned why we do it, and you want to get started. Well, there's some things to consider. Access is a thing to consider, y'all. Is court watching even possible where you live? And that's a question because there are 117 courthouses in North Carolina, and not all of them have the same access. And so we happen to live in Mecklenburg County, which is the most resourced county in North Carolina, and has one of the largest courtrooms, court systems, and all of that. So we're pretty lucky, and I say lucky because it's still court, but we're pretty lucky here to have the resources that we have. There are courtrooms that don't have broadband internet service, y'all. So while our courts are going into using WebEx and Zoom and other applications, there are people who are in counties that don't have broadband, don't even have an internet in the courtroom. So there is no way that they can have video arraignment. And so their process is delayed. Their access to justice is delayed as a result of that. So some courtrooms may not be open to the public, either in practice or by rule. Observing in some courtrooms may be impossible because there's inadequate seating or because it is too difficult to hear or see what is happening. What are the considerations to enter and navigate the building? There's actual physical conditions have to be considered as well. There are barriers such as court building days and hours of operation, and the location of specific courtrooms. Parking and the cost of parking is also something to consider. Here in Charlotte and Mecklenburg, when you go to park at the courthouse parking, I think it's $3 every half hour, or maybe every hour, but still it can be, if you're going to be there for a while and on multiple days, that can be an issue as to why people don't court watch. And so we also have to consider the rules and regulations of the court building, and not just the building, because when you go into the building here in Mecklenburg County or any courthouse, you're going to be sent through a metal detector, empty your pockets type screening. And they also have different rules. So Cabarrus County, there are no phones, no laptops, no anything. Don't even bring it inside the courthouse, which is like that in plenty of counties. But in Mecklenburg, you can bring your phone, you can bring your laptop, you can bring your iPad. You can work in the courtroom if you need to. So individual courthouses have their own rules and regulations, but then individual courtrooms have their own rules and regulations. And then there are judges who have their own rules and regulations. So there are 3 sets of policies and rules that you have to navigate. So whatever the rules and regulations of the building, of the courtrooms, like I said, how you enter, what you wear. I have, oh, and y'all don't know this about me. Brittany, you said I would tell them about myself. So let me tell you about how I know so much about court. I am a person who the state of North Carolina considers to be a habitual felon. I am someone who at some points in my life engaged in behaviors that landed me in jails. And going through the system, the many, many years that I went through the system, you just learn how to navigate it in a way that most people don't. Well, I ain't gonna say most, a lot of people do, but some people don't. And so there was a judge one time, I had gotten out of jail, like, I don't know, they let me out like 6 in the morning, something like that, 6 in the morning, because it had to be before shift change or I was gonna have to wait to after shift change. So they let me out like 6 in the morning, and I have a court date that afternoon at 1 o'clock, like a first appearance. And so if I was still in custody, they would have taken me to that appearance. But since I was out on my own, I needed to go back to that first appearance. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna leave the downtown area, I'll just stay. I'm not gonna go home and change. So they arrested me, I had on shorts and a tank top. When I got back to court at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when the judge came onto the bench and they called my name and I said here and I went up there, he threatened to lock me up because I had on shorts and tank top. So I tell you that to say, like, it is there, and those things happen to this day. I've seen judges tell people, you should have had on a necktie. Why'd you come to court dressed like this? Why don't you have on this? Why are you dressed like that? And that happens. And so those are also things that you can observe, but those are also things that you need to be cognizant of so that you make sure that as an observer, that you don't do anything that's going to get you removed from that courtroom. So if a deputy asks you to leave, you can definitely ask them, why are they asking you to leave? It was your understanding that this is a public courtroom, things like that, and you can advocate for yourself, but you don't want to get held and drug out of there either. And we also have different considerations if we are Black or brown people. We have to also be aware of how law enforcement interacts and sees Black and brown people as more of a threat than they do our white counterparts. And so conducting yourself in a courtroom is going to be essential because we also know that how judges decide or their mood can depend on what happens in that courtroom. And if we piss off a judge, now everyone who comes before that judge may have a different experience because of our behavior in the courtroom. So we don't ever want to do anything that's going to negatively impact the person who is being held, right? Because we have the freedom to get kicked out of that courtroom and to leave and go home that night. That might not be what they're able to do. You are not permitted to use cell phones, like take photos or record video. You can't even talk when court is in session. I don't care if the judge is on the bench or not. If the deputy says that court is in session, you do not talk. In Mecklenburg County, you can write notes on a piece of paper. So here in Mecklenburg County, you'll more than likely be observing at the Mecklenburg County courthouses, which is right at the corner of McDowell and 4th Street. Like I said, the court will have a metal detector similar to an airport. Make sure you follow all the instructions as you go through security. Make sure you retrieve all your personal items before you leave the screening area. So also things to consider. How does the system work? Well, it's going to be very overwhelming when you go to court. I can just tell you that the language, if you're not familiar with legalese or the acronyms that they use, you'll be lost. They oftentimes speak in very rapid, hushed tones, not into the microphone. So keeping up and hearing it can be difficult. So if you don't know what the procedural steps in a criminal case or an immigration detention proceeding in your jurisdiction, you'll find yourself lost inside of that courthouse. So say you wanted to decide on fees and fines, you would need to figure out what courtroom would you most likely be able to observe the use of fees and fines. And so in Mecklenburg, if you want to see fees and fines, a whole lot of fees and fines, you're gonna look at traffic court, and that's courtroom 1130. If you've never been, you wouldn't know, right? And so you would think you're going to maybe courtroom 4110, which is more misdemeanor things. And they do have fees and fines assessed there, but not the constant assessment of fees and fines like in courtroom 1130. So court accessibility is not just about physical access, but it's about knowing the procedural path of a case from arrest to resolution. So I want to get into that a little bit. Some of y'all probably never been arrested, and that's good. But but for the people that have, we know all too well that what happens. So and in North Carolina, we don't really call it arraignment, but anyway, we're gonna use a global term. Most people know what arraignment means. So you're arrested by the police, right? You get taken to a jail cell. You get taken to the jail, and then you see the magistrate in Mecklenburg County. And here it says within 48 hours because, again, Mecklenburg County is a more resource county. We have magistrates available 24 hours. And in the smaller counties, the magistrate is not always available. Sometimes the magistrate has to be called in and come from their house to get to the courthouse. So all of those things can happen. So anyway, in Mecklenburg County, you are arrested. You're taken downtown to the jail, right across from the courthouse. You go through arrest processing where, now this is before probable cause has been substantiated, like the charges have been substantiated or any of that. You get your fingerprints, you get your picture taken, and then you're taken to the second floor where you see the magistrate. The magistrate reads your charges and sets the conditions of your release. The conditions of your release can be financial or non-financial. The way our state statute reads, those conditions, the first things that judges consider should be non-financial conditions of release, unless they find very specific reasons as to why a person deserves to be held on monetary conditions. So a secured bond or a cash bond, right? And then after you see the magistrate, you go on to where your cell is going to be. Then you have your first appearance before the judge. And at that appearance, you can say to your judge, I work every day. I have my children. You may be able to advocate for yourself. Court watchers may be there to advocate for you, to talk about what your release could look like, right? And after that, if you are able to get an unsecured bond or to pay your bond, you go home and you await trial. If you are too poor to afford any of that, you sit in jail while you await your trial. And here, even in Mecklenburg County, depending on what you're charged with, you could wait for days, weeks, months, and on some felonies, people are waiting for years for their trial because they're too poor to purchase their freedom from the state. So, things to consider, especially in light of COVID. Excuse me, the capacity. What is your capacity to staff and manage a court watching project? If you want to start your own project, if you want to be a part of our project that we have here at the ACLU, you have to ask yourself, how much time can I commit? And be realistic about it. I don't have any preset notions in my mind of how much time you should, but you need to be clear about how much time you can dedicate. Who are you working with? So if you decide to start your own court watching program because you might have an interest in domestic violence, and so you decide, well, I'm going to do a court watching that centers around domestic violence. You have to look at who you're working with. So collaborating with other organizations that do similar work can provide you with additional capacity for organizing the program, as well as you can have more robust results as a result of that collaboration. If you partner with public defenders, that can be helpful for designing and leading volunteer trainings on the legal and logistical aspects of the court process. If you partner with an academic institution or a well-funded nonprofit, they can be used for data cleaning, analysis, and reporting. And so if you do decide to do a collaborative project between groups, if you have differing political positions, it may be important, and I'm not going to say it may be, it's important to have a conversation around the values and value alignment early on in the process. Before starting any program on your own, it's a good idea to do a scan of the landscape to see if there are any community groups that are already doing this work that you can maybe partner with. And so we just kind of went through that. So if you decide to collect information, you have to decide, what will you do with this information? What do you need to produce or to help achieve your goal? How will you produce project outputs, and how much time is it required? Who's your audience? How will you present your findings in ways that are meaningful and impactful? We don't want to create things that are transactional, that just check a box off. Say, well, we went and court watched and that's it. We want to do things that really inform and change the way and disrupt and agitate the system in really meaningful ways. So we've already talked about some of this. Silence your phone, arrive early, no speaking once court is in session, no food, no drinks, no gun, no sleeping. I know that sounds, I mean, and you, listen, they will get you for sleeping more than anything. And I have seen that the deputy can be sitting up there asleep. I'm talking about sleep. And if they wake up and see you sleep, they're gonna come over and say to you, you need to wake up, right? And so, again, remembering that your behavior in that courtroom impacts the people being detained the most, and that your behavior in that courtroom, not just from the judge, but from deputies, because deputies are the people who transport people to and fro from the jail into the courtroom. And if they are frustrated with our behavior, we don't want them to take that frustration out on the people who are in their custody. And so, y'all, I know that I literally flew through that. And the reason I flew through it was because I wanted to leave space for you to ask questions and for us to have a deeper conversation. I see some questions. I see one question here. How do you know what projects are already ongoing? How do you do the research groups? And how do you research the groups and what they're focused on? So you can, like we do most things, I would say Google. Here in Charlotte, the ACLU court watching is not the only court watching program. There is a court watching program called Court Watch Charlotte, and they're on the other side of the spectrum. They are looking to make sure that judges are as punitive and harsh as possible. And so you will see them, they attend court in their red shirts. They are mostly in the trial courtrooms though, and on the upper floors. They don't tend to be on the first floor where like traffic court or first appearance where bails are being set. So if you do decide to court watch, you'll see them. They have on red shirts, and their specific job is to make sure that judges are mean and nasty. And so like, yeah, Google, Facebook, or social media. Lots of groups have social media. They use like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can search there. I know there was an immigration court watching. There is an immigration court watching group that watches, and especially they focus on, if I'm not mistaken, children who, you know, in immigration proceedings, children don't have a right to have an attorney. So they're babies in an immigration courtroom, and there's literally nobody there to defend them or to speak on their behalf. And when I say babies, I mean 4 months old, 6 months old, babies, right? And then there are children who are young children who know the pain and the trauma of being separated from their parents, who don't speak the language, who know that this is a scary place to be, from a detention center to a courtroom, and don't have anyone to defend them. And so it is very important that those courtrooms be watched as well to see what's happening to the children. So does anyone else have any other questions that they would like to discuss?
Kristie, I just have a quick statement. This is Brittany, and I just want to say we did this training, and I so appreciate Kristie because we did this training earlier last year, and I participated in some of the court watch, and it has been truly an eye-opening experience. It has really increased my knowledge when it comes to the justice system. As a newbie going in, you definitely have questions, and unfortunately you can't say, hey, judge, could you stop for a minute and tell me what this means? So unfortunately you can't do that, but I definitely will say that you definitely have the opportunity to really learn about that, and also being able to see that, you know, they went through almost 60 cases in about a matter of 3 hours, and that was an eye-opening experience. And majority of those individuals, probably 80% of them, were Black males. just sitting in jail just because they couldn't afford the bail. And so it is a snowball effect, because those individuals that are sitting in jail will then lose their home. They can't, of course, their world continues to go. And so it's just, I really have enjoyed that experience. And again, it has really increased my knowledge and awareness of what's going on in the court system.
Thank you, Brittany. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
And
Well,
I'd love to
$20 later,
echo, I'd love to echo what Brittany has said. And Kristie, thank you. This was so well done. And I can't wait to hear the questions. Probably one of the most basic questions would be, pretend like we're going in tomorrow to court watch, even though we know we can't.
Yeah.
What kind of like court watch 101 things do we need to know about logistics? You know, where do we give our notes? You know, all this stuff that you know, like the back of your hand, what do we need to know?
So we aren't collecting data at the moment because we have so much data from last year that we still have to process. It just doesn't make sense to keep adding paperwork and we still haven't trudged through. As I stated, due to COVID, we have put that report is not on the front burner. It's just something that we have on hold right now. So if you were to go court watching tomorrow, you would be going and you would be going to, as Brittany described, increase your own awareness of what's happening every single day inside of the courtroom. What I would like to see happen is when the courts open back up, and I don't even know what that looks like. I don't even know what that looks like at the moment of opening up, because of just where we are and what would need to happen, and asking people to volunteer to place themselves, you know, at risk is difficult to do. But when we open back up, what I would like to see happen is that people observe in various courtrooms and see what interests them the most. There are people who were intrigued by the process of the first appearance and bail, but there are other people who are very interested in the way that intimate partner and domestic violence is addressed inside of a courtroom. There are other people who are very interested in the amount of jury trials versus dismissals and all types of other things. And so what I would say, the best way to see what you like or what you would be most interested in, because I don't think you're gonna like any of it because it's injustice, right? But what you're most passionate or what piques your interest the most is by sitting in various courtrooms. And it could be that you follow a particular judge who either you think does things really well or someone who you think does things really bad. You may just follow that judge to different courtrooms so they know that, hey, she's in my court no matter what. This person, he or she is in my courtroom. What's going on, right? And so we do have some particularly we do have some judges that do need a little bit more oversight than others when it comes to the new bail policy that was implemented. There are some who still just are not doing what the law states should be happening. And they have stated, like, I know what y'all said, but you're right. So that is something that we can address as a community. And we can address that by withholding a vote to a person who refused to uphold the law, right? We arrest people who don't uphold the law, but we don't hold elected officials accountable who violate constitutional, both the US and the North Carolina Constitution every single day. They receive immunity inside of the courthouses. But what we're saying is there is no immunity in the community. In the public court, you will be held accountable. And if that's nothing more than your colleagues and the people who when you are campaigning, if that is nothing more than when we attend those campaign events, we're able to say, no, that's not what you do in your courtroom. I've sat in your courtroom on many occasions and witnessed you doing these things, and really holding people's feet to the fire, because they have a huge responsibility, you all. I mean, this is a huge, these are the people who are determining the people who how much time a person spends inside of a carceral facility, right? And basically they decide how much trauma and how much punishment you get, because it's not about how much justice you get, because justice is about making things right. Incarceration is about punishing you. It doesn't care if it's right or not. Because if I steal your bike, you lock me up, do you have your bike back? You still without a bike. Now you got to pay $175 a day for me to be locked up. as a taxpayer because I stole that bike. Wouldn't justice be, I give you your bike back, have a restorative conversation about why I should never do that again, and we work together to ensure that I don't engage in that behavior anymore? That is what justice looks like. And so that's why the Campaign for Smart Justice is going to be focused on what does justice look like and how do we do that in a way that, again, benefits the people who are the most marginalized. And those are going to be the Black, the brown, and the poor people in our community. I see a couple of questions about next steps. Again, due to COVID, we don't know, quite honestly, what those next steps are. There are some court cases being tried and court cases happening, movement happening in the courtroom, but a lot of that is via WebEx. And so, yeah, and courtrooms, I know that there was an article that came out in the Observer the other day where Judge Trosh was saying, she's the chief resident district court judge, and she was saying the concern about their ability to provide masks for people who come to court without their own. And so what are we, how do we ensure people's safety inside of that courtroom? So that's what we are faced with right now. In light of COVID, we just don't know. There are some people who go to court though. Like I told you about the people in Durham, they're still going to their courtroom. They practice social distancing. They wear their masks and they attend court anyway. So, you know, there is some things that you could do in light of COVID, but I just don't feel comfortable asking people to go. I just don't. But when we start back up, when court has started, I would love to come back and have a general conversation. Brittany and the YWCA have always been really good about sharing the contact information for everyone who registers so that we can definitely follow up, put you on the court watching, kind of trained court watcher listserv, I would say, and make sure that you get that information about when we do start up again, because I do want to get you your t-shirts, make sure that you have the things that you need. And I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat, but how do you know? Someone said, oh, what do you do if you think you have witnessed something unjust or unfair? Well, it's going to be so many of those times that, you know, it's the unfair and unjust practices are baked into the daily processes of the court. So it would have to be so egregious before, you know, even we see egregious things happen and nothing happens, right? So I would say what I would like for you to do is to arm yourself with the knowledge. That person's name, that judge is going to be on your ballot. Remember their name on that ballot. Remember that unfair or unjust practice that they used or tactic that they used in their courtroom. Remember that and don't forget it. And then tell everybody that you know about what you witnessed. Encourage other people to learn more about the system. The system has operated in plain sight for so many years, you all. It is not used to scrutiny. It is not used to critique. And so the more that we can do to, number one, educate ourselves. And how many of you have heard of Educate to Engage? So if y'all know Patrice Funderburg, she says we educate, we engage, and we expose truths. So we educate ourselves about the issue, we engage action on those issues, and then we expose the truth about the system to others, right? And then that way we empower ourselves and our community to show up in radical ways that disrupts the status quo. Oh, is help needed with transcribing or organizing data? So we do have some help. We have some academic help, so I would say that no, we don't really need the help with transcribing the data. It's just, it's not just the ACLU that's a part of it. It's other organizations and institutions that we're working with. And so as a result of all of our organizations being impacted by COVID, we've had to just, that's a project that doesn't take front seat right now. And that's because we have been engaging in the very tiresome work of working to decarcerate people across the state of North Carolina. And so if y'all want to do something more immediate, we are engaged every week in Mecklenburg County on Fridays. I'm sorry, Siri just started talking. I'm sorry, y'all. That you go out to the jail. We do a rolling protest. it's not even a rolling protest, it's a rolling rally where we honk our horns and we show love to the people who are inside. And they absolutely look forward to us showing them love, because what they feel is that they have been forgotten inside of a place that to them is a very sunken place. I don't know if anyone has ever been to jail, or a prison, but just the concrete, the smell, the cold, is just not a place for people. And it's just not a good place. And so with the lack of information, the guards control what news they receive if they are able to watch the news. And so you have people who are very afraid of contracting COVID, who are there simply because they're poor. And so just all of that plays into why we go out to show love to the incarcerated people every Friday in that rolling protest. And we also tomorrow will be at Butner because 8 people have died in the Federal Bureau of Prisons custody here in North Carolina. We'll also be rolling to Polk Correctional because we know that the DPS is overrun with COVID as well, and their response has been lackluster at best. So those are things that you can get directly involved in if you would like, to show the incarcerated people how much you care for them, and not just so much for them, but for their situation, right? I mean, no one deserves to die and be exposed to a disease, a communicable disease, because of something that they've done. I mean, that's just not what we want for people. That's not what they were sentenced to. And again, when we talk about a jail, the majority of those people have not been convicted of a crime. They have been accused of a crime that they are too poor to pay to get out. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. Let me just look one more last time. Where's the best place to access court ruling records of specific judges on the ballot? Now that is a good question that I don't know if that exists. Other than requesting transcripts, I would have to, and I will do this, I will ask the attorneys that I work with if there's any record, because I'm sure somebody would have published it if it was, or maybe it exists and they just haven't published it. Are we able to view online trials? You have to have the link. So I'm not sure, to be honest. The only trial that I've attended since is, well, the only hearing I've attended since COVID is because the ACLU of North Carolina sued the governor and DPS. And so we had a hearing and we attended a WebEx hearing, but we had to be added by the clerk, and it wasn't just you could come. The clerk had to add your email address to the WebEx invite and all of that. So again, some courtrooms, from what I understand, are open, but on a limited basis. And I think it changes too. I know some attorneys are saying that they have to, their complaint has been that they have to email the judge things, and it's taken the judge 2 or 3 days to respond when it would have been, they could have just went into the courtroom and had this done right then. And so that's causing a delay in people being released and their ability to navigate their client's case. So you can find, okay, thank you. Is that Robert, my boss? Hey, my boss is on here, y'all. Y'all tell him I did a good job. You can find judges' rulings on Westlaw. So if you have a Westlaw account, right, which I don't, you can look up a judge's rulings on that. So if you would like to do that, you can. And we want to be respectful. What you've shared today, is that available for review somewhere? Yes, I will send this to Brittany, the slides to Brittany. Is that okay, Brittany, or do you want me to send it out?
We have actually recorded this Zoom, so we can send that out if that's okay with you, Kristie. So either way, we can send it out, or if you want to send it out, but we've recorded this Zoom.
Okay, I'll send you the slide deck just so if people want to just
Perfect.
get the slide deck as well. All right.
Perfect.
All right, y'all. I'm sorry, Brittany, what'd you say?
I just wanted to say thank you so much. In the Zoom etiquette of clapping, I guess it's like this. So thank you so much. We will actually be sending you all a survey to the email addresses that you used to register this evening. And then I also wanted to kind of share with you all that YWCA will be hosting a virtual Stand Against Racism event We usually host this every year in April. We've actually had to move it quite a few times due to rain or COVID or whatever. So we will actually be having this in June. You can find more information about this forum on our website. We will also have a forum the night before, which will be June 25th. About how COVID-19 has impacted our systems. And so we'll have guest speakers, our District Attorney Spencer Merriweather, our Sheriff McFadden, Shay Merritt from Loaves and Fishes, and General Presbyter Jan Edmiston. And our moderator will be Melvin Herring from Johnson C. Smith University. So we hope that you will participate in that forum, as well as our June 26th virtual forum. That'll be all day long, and then 11 to 1 we will actually be on Park Road. So come by and honk your horn and celebrate for our stand against racism, and that we're standing for this, especially during COVID-19. So we cannot thank you enough for joining us. I hope you all are ready and excited about being court watchers. Again, this is something that we can do together. So if any of you all want to do this together, we can always carpool over when the courts, of course, open and we have time. We can always do this together, especially if those are first timers as well. So again, thank you, Kristie, so very much. You did an awesome job. So kudos, and we couldn't thank you. We love this partnership with you. So thank you so much.
Thank y'all. And when we get ready to get back into the groove, I'll make sure that I reach out so that we can have, I can go with you guys to court. So you're not just going by yourself. You won't feel lost. I'll be there to help you and to guide you and make sure you feel empowered to do this work. Thank y'all for coming. This is amazing.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Kristie. Have a good evening, and please stay safe, everyone. Thank you, Shirley, for joining us. Okay, I think I got it.
I was like, leave. Oh my God.
I finally figured it out. God, Zoom. This was great. I was really impressed. And I caught some of the names too, so thank you for catching that. I so appreciate you.
Yeah, so what I did was I just like,
Oh, let's stop recording.
Well, I was going to say too that like, it should be, I think that there's a way to like edit it, like edit the recording, but I can't stop it. But you might be able to stop it, but I can't stop it right now.
Okay, well, great job. Thank you so much for your help. This was really good. She did a fantastic job. And Ruth King was there. Like,
I know. When I was like, Ruth King here, I was like,
That is awesome. That we hands down. And then she said that she felt like she was what did she say? A woman of, what did she say? A wise woman of some sort. That's awesome.
Thank you. You're so welcome. I'm going to send this email now. It has the SurveyMonkey link. It has the donation link. And then I also included a link to the events page for them to register for the COVID-19 forum.
You're awesome. I so appreciate you. I really do. This has been awesome. I'm so glad. One down.
Yeah.
One more to go. Jeez. I'm so ready for all this to be over with. But it's going to be great. I think SAR is going to be awesome. I cannot wait. So, again, thank you so much. Get some sleep. Send that out, and then just be done, please.
Okay. I will. All
right. I'll see you tomorrow, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.